Before I get into the nature of why about the project and why I decided to do my project on spoon theory, I'll just give a backstory on what spoon theory is. So spoon theory was a concept that was created by a woman named Christina Missarandino, a very hard name to pronounce. So she came up with this concept of being able to explain what it's like as a sufferer of chronic illness. So the story being that one day she was out with a friend of hers and they went out for a meal, and her friend would notice that she had to take so many tablets, and she's been noticing it for a while, and she could never understand why. She knew that she had some type of illness, but because chronic illness doesn't affect you in terms of like a disability where you're able to do most things, it looks quite normal. So she just couldn't get her head around why so many tablets needed to be taken in order for her to feel better. So Christina came up with this concept by seeing some spoons on the table and said, now if you take these spoons and each of these spoons allow you to have as a unit of energy in order to do a task. So for an example, if within a day you're allocated the amount of energy that you have a day is 10 spoons. Now each task may be different, so washing the dishes could be 3 spoons and drying them may be 4 spoons. Now there's only a certain amount of tasks that you can do per day until you hit your limit of 10 spoons before your energy is all gone. And this is how the spoon theory came about, and it's become this major phenomenon within the chronic illness world, because it's a way of people who are suffering with chronic illness being able to explain how they feel on a day-to-day basis to their peers, to friends, to family, and it allows them to actually feel normal. And I say normal because going through any type of illness, whether it's mental illness, physical illness, emotional illness, you do have that sense of drawback and not feeling part of society because you feel different. And with this spoon theory becoming a big thing, it's actually transferred into many different analogies in the sense of mental illness as well. It's allowed people who are suffering with these illnesses to actually be able to come forward and say, this is what I've got, this is how it feels to me on a day-to-day basis, and this is how I feel every day. I can't do certain things all the time. I have to plan and adapt in order to be able to do the things that I want to do that makes me feel normal. First question being why I wanted to take on this project, why I wanted to look into chronic illness. So backstory of me really is that my partner, my fiance, she currently suffers with a chronic illness called fibromyalgia, and she is a regular user in terms of the spoon theory. And what excited me about this project is the fact of one having first-hand in the autobiographical side of the illness, and obviously seeing her struggle and her telling me her struggle, so it's an autobiographical point of view, but also my biographical point of view in the sense of being able to see what's happening and listening, taking that first-hand research in what it's like in the world of chronic illness. So there's a quote by a woman named Deirdre Hedden. She wrote a book called Autobiographical and Performing Selves. And in this quote she mentions that autobiographical performances can capitalise on theatre's unique temporality, its here and nowness, and on its ability to respond to and engage with the present while always keeping an eye on the future. Which I felt was very interesting, because especially wanting to perform, finding a way how to theatrically perform this, I found that very interesting because, like I said, I'm only coming from the actual biographical point of view. So it was the fact that within theatre, especially within applied theatre, it touches on the basis of the temporary kind of now, like this is what's happening. It's a wake-up call, and which it was through doing my research. It was very much of a wake-up call in the sense of what was new, what understanding the amount of different chronic illnesses, and understanding what it's like from an autobiographical point of view on Kate's side, but also, like I said, researching from the biographical side, which was another quote by another woman named by Ursula Canton, which she was the writer called Biographical Theatre Representing Real People. And then she goes on to mention that the most common term to describe a performance style that suggests a faithful imitation of the world outside the theatre is probably theatrical realism. Now, she used that definition, which was created by Ruby Kahn, and the reason why is that it is a theatrical realism. It's the fact that, again, from my point of view, that what I'm seeing on a day-to-day basis is very theatrical realism. It's very real, it's happening, and especially, like I said, within applied theatre, it's most effective. She then goes on to say that it refers to any formal means that make a performance resemble a slice of life, rather than a carefully constructed aesthetic experience. So it's giving the audience, giving me, for an example, whilst doing my research, it's actually giving me that slice of what it's like to be in her shoes, which I felt was very moving, in the sense that coming from someone that has never been chronic or never been diagnosed with any chronic illnesses, I've never felt the pains that Kate has felt. It was very interesting to know that how, like, just this snippet of little things that I can see happening, and even I'm imitating the sense to actually gain a better understanding of the illness, provides me that little slice of life, that theatrical realism that I actually pick up and be able to then progress on with research. I've had to narrow it down to 3 main theorists that had a major part in what I was looking into. So the first person I was looking into was by the name of Dr. Kathleen Gallagher. She's the University of Toronto. She's a professor there within drama and education, and also within applied theatre there. She did a video online which was called Engaging Youth Through Theatre. Now, it was, her idea was that it was a way of youths being able to communicate and be able to share knowledge and techniques through the art of theatre and applied theatre. So she mentions in the video, she states, in a theatre making process in which youth may be using verbatim theatre to tell us something about their experiences. This becomes an interesting research artifact, but it also provides means for dialogue among peers and researchers, having a flexible record of processes of creating theatre and layers of communicating different types of knowledge that speaks to the question of engagement through theatre. Now, a bit backstory on Dr. Kathleen Gallagher. So, like I said, she is the professor at University of Toronto within applied theatre and theatre and education studies. So she goes on in the video. She goes on to explain that how communicating is a complex issue in a way that that it's hard to actually, especially nowadays, to actually talk and actually be able to get across certain knowledge. And this is where theatre, applied theatre, with theatre education, comes in and helps it out. Really, it creates a substance that would be able to communicate. So one word that comes out for me in terms of that theory was more of communication. It was communicating across my standpoint from a biographical point of view, and also communicating the understanding and the knowledge that I've researched and listened to from an autobiographical point of view, which is from, like I said, my partner. And how this relates really is this, through the project, that the foundation of the project is on the facts of communication. Whether that's with the audience, obviously, again, within the performance, the audience members got up and actually did part of got them to do different activities and how to do these activities in order to feel, like I said, a slice of life, feel what it's like to be part of of having a chronic illness, or between myself and Kate, which was in terms of our relationship, and our relationship with our daughter, our relationship with our friends and our families, and it was just grasping a greater knowledge of what's happening, experiencing the other side through simple learning to communicate. And theorist that I looked into was by the name of George Belival, and he is also a professor at the University of Toronto, at the University of British Columbia in Canada, and he specialises in theatre and drama education. And he's also did a video more in depth on theatre and education, and he goes on to explain, and he says in the video that it's all about how drama and interactive learning can be a way of not only delivering content, but just a way to think about other ways of teaching, so that you can become inside the work rather than outside the work. This resonated quite a lot as well, because even though this is on the standpoint of teaching, it fits in with what my project was about. It was in order to gain that knowledge, in order to gain that experience, in order to be able to communicate, I need to immerse myself inside the work. I needed to get involved. I needed to try some of these these activities that I was asking, obviously within the performance, audience members to do. The actual feeling, the emotion side of it before I can, rather than just researching it online and actually saying, okay, this is what it said. It gave you a bigger, broader way of actually putting across what it is that you want to talk about, and what I wanted to talk about. Like I said, which was the main focus really, was the autobiographical point of view and also the biographical point of view on my side. So even though this is, like I said, it's a part of the educational, the drama and education, it helped me with the practical side of the project. It also, to further understand the autobiographical element, because again, which is quite a contention with the two sides, because even though I'm being biographical in the sense that I'm doing the research, I'm understanding what, from the autobiographical point of view, I'm understanding how she, as Kate, felt, how she feels, and that slice, that little part of what I'm doing is actually making me understand and actually grasp the actual knowledge of what's going on and how it actually feels. So I can then have a stronger in-depth dialogue on both biographical and autobiographical research. Not only becomes that it's similar in intent, but it's also the contention within the ideologies of what was more important. And then the third theorist I wanted to go into, which is a bit taken back, it's kind of stepping outside the world of theatre, and it's by a man named Dr. Jordan B. Peterson. Now, he's a psychologist, professor of psychology at the University of Toronto, and Professor Peterson wrote a book called 12 Rules for Life. Now, in the second chapter of the book, he wrote the chapter was called Treat Yourself Like Someone You're Responsible for Helping. Now, I wanted to gain, in order to progress with this project, I wanted to look also outside of the field of theatre. So, like I said, I was looking into applied theatre, I was looking into biographical and autobiographical theatre, but I wanted to look at what taking theatre aside, what is also important, and the psychological well-being is also important, which I found in the there's a video online as well that Dr. Jordan Peterson specifically talks about that chapter, and he talks about he goes on to state that 2 reasons why people don't like themselves very much. 1, we're fragile, damageable and imperfect in multiple dimensions all the time, and that often just gets worse. And 2, he mentions you are also capable of vicious acts of malevolence, and so it's a real existential question for people. Why the hell should you take care of something as sorry and wretched as you are? So this was very, very important for me because it enabled me to look into the psychological side of both the biographical and autobiographical. So we start with the autobiographical, for instance. So it was the looking into the sense of what it was psychologically what it was doing for Kate, not being able to do certain things because she had different. She had very little limits in terms of like her spoon theory, so in terms of how many spoons she used per day, and how that made her feel. She didn't feel like she had a normal life, and also on the biographical point of view, just how it felt with me, how I had to deal with that, how I'm watching someone constantly go through something. There's nothing really I could do, but funny enough, I think what Dr. Jordan Peterson is saying, which I felt integrated with my project very, very well, is that it's talking about how we don't look after ourselves. We tend to look after other people more so than ourselves. In a way, it's the courteous side of being helpful and being caring, but also it's not good. And what it goes on to say is the reason why it's not good is because you need to give yourself just the amount of care in order to sustain the amount of care that someone else needs. So as the project was on chronic illness, the diagnosis for illnesses such as fibromyalgia, etc., is that it's a part of the mind which in online doctors actually do prescribe you to go counselling, and also to do meditating alongside with prescribed narcotics. So psychologically, it's a very big deal within the element of chronic illness and what you have to do on a day-to-day in order to keep yourself treading water. So this chapter helps from a psychological view, as Peterson goes on to explain essentially why it's important to treat yourself, and obviously the same as you should treat how I should treat myself, the way I treat Kate, how I should make sure that I have some of importance of care in order to be able to sustain that with Kate. In order to approach this research, I had to approach it in 3 different main steps. The first step being identifying the illness, which is naturally the first thing that normally when you're doing any kind of key research you have to research what it is that you want to talk about. So I wanted to find out what chronic illness was. I wanted to find out what the symptoms was like, what the familiarities, familiarising myself with the causes of these symptoms, where it comes from, where it stems from, what different types of symptoms can lead to different types of chronic illnesses, and also the activities and changes that these chronic illnesses have, and leading on to the aftermath of chronic pain. Which then incorporates the spoon theory by Miseredino. Sorry, it's a very hard name to say. But so that was my first approach. I had to look into that. So I had to create this foundation, this substance of the initial target. So let's say the initial target of what I'm talking about, and which is the chronic illness. The second step then had to be start identifying the signs. So looking at the different forums on social media and on different forums on websites and NHS websites and just anywhere that has some kind of forum of people giving their shared experience and what they did that day and how they were diagnosed and etc. And also relating all this back to Kate's, my partner's activities and obviously her science. So I had to note down the similar experiences and differences. So what was similar to the people, what they were saying online, what was different. I had to also, by documenting from other spoonies, and how the symptoms and general attitudes changed on a day-to-day basis, not just for obviously for Kate but also for mine. Looking at how the simple moments such as having a babysitter one night or just going to like a movie or something, how different activities like a change of pace actually change the mood and change the attitudes between, like I said, not just the autobiographical but also the biographical point and my side, like how that affected me in that sense. And then obviously we're going on to the last and final step, which was identifying the link. So then I was finding how that the both step 1 and step 2 related and integrated the similarities and differences of both biographical and autobiographical. So the prep itself of the project took a lot longer than the actual performance itself, putting together the performance itself, because as this project felt more theoretically accelerated rather than it being a practically motivated performance, research. So I was understanding, but understanding outweighed the practical elements. So it was gathering all the information of chronic illness before I could even interpret and put into words and also put into a performance what I want the audience members to take from that performance. So again, like I said, the length of the actual research itself was a lot longer because I had to get all the backstory straight. I had to understand as much as I could from the autobiographical side. I had to also relate the autobiographical research to what was coming from my biographical research, and identifying what the links to those are, and why that actually is quite similar in a sense. It's even though that one's a physical pain and one's an emotional pain or a psychological pain, they both fit because the moods were quite the same and the outcomes were starting to come out more of the same rather than different. And there were obviously differences, but it was just more finding that link and also identifying what it is and what I'm how I supposed to feel in that, and how she, again, like from an autobiographical point of view, she was feeling at that point. First, I discovered the spoon measurement changed according to the physical ability. It was obviously the spoon theory chart. So there's an actual chart online that you can find, which I found when I was studying. It gives you how specific tasks have a certain specific amount of spoons. So for an example, like driving, it equated to 4 spoons, and because of obviously having these, when investigating this in an experiment, which I'd done with Kate, which basically consisted of 8 activities a day for 5 days. The measurements, 5 days, and then measuring on what she was like within those 5 days, and it was a time between 3 and 4 p.m. So it was not so much a active time, but it was enough because kids come back from school or there's traffic and stuff like that. So it was just kind of seeing what she was like in the house, and I found that 3 to 4 p.m. Gave more of a better output on the activities that I wanted, the experiment that I wanted to create. So yeah, so like I said about driving and being 4 spoons per that task, but it never counted for the use of the spoons per energy. So chronic illness is known for its physical and mental disabilities, which means each day is different depending on the amount of energy is used. So driving may be worth 4 spoons per that task, but it could also alter depending on other use of energy that day. So for example, if that day she had a spurt of energy and she felt a lot more energy than she did the day before, theoretically she used 4 spoons for driving, but the energy itself, it will be completely different. She won't be as exhausted or as tired or as down or as in much pain, because she's probably had more of a rest. So in my findings, I found that I found myself throughout this experiment, I was measuring from units per task and spoons per task, and also spoons per energy. So as as it got closer towards the end of the week, the units per spoons, so the units per task for spoons and the spoons per energy were gradually getting bigger. Another thing that I also found interesting was that spoon theory doesn't actually just work for people with just chronic physical illness. Like I said earlier on in the video, and also just that we all know that chronic illness is a physical and mental disability. But everyone, the spoon theory was created obviously by Miss Christina to explain the effects of her pain in a simple and easy way. But this could be stretched towards general exhaustion. So in wider terms, the spoon theory could actually relate to anyone, including myself. So again, like I said, I was looking at the autobiographical. The actual spoon theory itself extends to the biographical side, the spoon theory of my side, the side that what it's like to be in the position that I was in, and watching someone go through that, and okay, maybe not in terms of, like I said, in physical pain, but in mental and emotional pain. I found that was very interesting, because it seemed like a theory that was used to explain something so difficult to be so simple in terms of physical pain actually equates to a wider range of emotional, psychological well-being also. Biological and autobiological research do have a lot of similarities, like I've mentioned before, and I also mentioned before that there are differences. But what I found in coming to concluding my research, that the similarities are more than what was anticipated. It's confirming what the autobiographical has been referencing for a while, but from a different standpoint. The differences that I found were the opinions that arise from the research. So for an example, I will agree that the physical pain seems to be painful in terms of like a reference to my partner, but at times, obviously at times, but also as I'm not the one who's in that physical pain myself, it can be interpreted in many different ways. So like I said, the example of that is when Kate came to me in the past and told me she's in a lot of pain. She didn't seem like she was in that much pain purely because I couldn't see the pain itself. I could only see what was physically in front of me, and it was just a human being that was standing. Yeah, she looked like she was in pain, but I couldn't feel that pain myself. So that's why I feel like the differences arise and they part ways in that sense. But many of the findings through this project were very similar in terms of the biographical and autobiographical. It can be the other way around in a sense. So for an example, mentally wise, because Kate goes through a lot of pain physically, there'll be days when I'm feeling emotionally and mentally exhausted, but she won't identify that because the pain is, she's also suffering her own pain. So it's and obviously because she's suffering this illness, the attention will be more on her own self-concerns. So with the theory of applied theatre communication, it was very much important being able to gain the understanding from both the biological and autobiographical arguments, actually build a better forward way of thinking, not just for awareness of chronic illness, but everything that is important in history and society. Psychologically, and this raises the awareness of what Dr. Pearson was saying in obviously within the second chapter of his book, by allowing ourselves to be treated right by ourselves. We can understand a lot more what's needed to be done in order to be able to achieve the real happiness. So in order to conclude this project wasn't just about the research within chronic illness and how it can be theatrically created and what my research was about. It was also, I think it was about working out what the end goal would be after this. And so after finishing my research so far, it's revealing to be that it's all about balance. Having a balance of knowledge, communication and active research together, that fundamentally these elements create the foundations of which to gain a deeper understanding of active research, the understanding. So for me in this example is within chronic illness and how that relates to theatre, how that relates psychologically, how that relates in everyday life. It's the communication part between the autobiographical and the biographical. The active research within that is understanding what the autobiographical side is, understanding also realising and understanding what the biographical side is, and then and it's just creating, and obviously the knowledge from both of those things creates then the balance in order to be able to create more of a greater understanding within the future, and obviously create a goal that can be achieved.